So my opinion on this partner showcase might be a bit controversial in terms of it being more positive than what the internet consensus seems to be, but in my opinion, this partner showcase was okay. Not great, but I don't think it was that bad. I understand why people weren't thrilled with it, but I think that just looking at this presentation in a vacuum, it was alright. I'll try to explain why that is, but also why I definitely understand the perspective of people who didn't like this presentation. Now for a 30-minute presentation, I will admit, the fact that only 2 announcements really heavily interest me is not great, but coming from my position, where I have a backlog that is full of games begging to be played, especially those on the longer side, I will try to get to them. I don't really need much right now, so I'll go over the few announcements I'm interested in. First off is the classic Bomberman collection. Quick piece of rider lore here, I have heavy nostalgia for this guy. One of the first experiences with being hooked on something other than a game from the company with the funny Wahoo Bomberman was when I visited a friend of my siblings' house, and I got hooked on Bomberman Live on the 360. This led to me buying and playing the hell out of one of the Bomberman games on DSi, and that was solely me playing single player matches against computers, along with later getting Bomberman R1, after I found it for cheap, though I haven't touched that one as much as I'd like to. So seeing a collection of classic games get released, as a shadow drop no less, though digital only, and for just $20, makes it pretty likely I'll be hopping on this at some point. The other game that seriously intrigued me was Paranormicite, The Mermaid's Curse. Now this is just a first impression, so it may be heavily off base, but what I saw gave me heavy Famicom Detective Club vibes, and I really like those remakes, though I still need to get around to MEO. Though I'm sure it does more than enough to stand on its own, as they sit on top of speaking to the characters to progress through the investigation. There's also parts where you traverse through the water that goes along with that. This game also comes out in just a couple weeks, so if you're like me and interested, good news is you don't have to wait long for it. Now those were the 2 announcements that really interested me, but I do think there were a few other announcements that at least had cool parts to them. Orbitals opened the presentation, and this was probably the most intriguing announcement to me that wasn't any of the games I previously mentioned. This game was apparently also shown at the Game Awards, though I was unaware because I don't really care for TGA as a show. The main characters were really charming in the little I got to see of them interacting in this trailer, and I liked the music in the background. If there was a way I had to describe this game, it's a co-op puzzle adventure game that's kind of in the style of It Takes Two and Split Fiction. This game is also apparently launching exclusively to Switch 2 this summer, so that's something. After that, for me, was the announcement of console archives in addition to arcade archives, as the first console archives were announced to be Cool Borders and Ninja Gaiden 2, which were shadow drops. They also announced Doraemon and Sonic Wings Special directly, and promised more in the future. This seems like it's going to be the sort of virtual console replacement, though probably not with many Nintendo games there, if any at all, since obviously the NSO apps exist. This is not only cool for what we got here, but what it could mean for games we get in the future. As a few miscellaneous things about games, Tokyo Scramble didn't really interest me as a game, but definitely have one of the highlights of the presentation in its very weird usage of game share, as it allows up to 4 players to each take over different aspects of a single player's control scheme. This sounds like it is going to work terribly in practice, but honestly, if you have the right group of people, it also sounds like it could honestly be really fun, if for all the wrong reasons. I do respect them experimenting with game share as a feature though. I didn't notice it at first, but after I saw it pointed out, I can't help but also find it hilarious how the person playing for the Resident Evil Requiem footage had to play bad and miss on purpose, just for the sake of meeting requirements pertaining to the age rating of the presentation. And obviously there were other notable things, such as Hollow Knight getting a Switch 2 edition, FF7 Rebirth, Adventures of Elliot, though I will agree I think the HD 2D style was definitely worn off on people due to its overuse in recent years, and we might need to lay off a bit. Primata doesn't seem like my game, but I still was kinda interested seeing in this presentation. Digimon Story Time Stranger, and Monster Hunter Stories 3. So yeah, a lot of not so new stuff, but it is still cool to see on Switch 2. So why do people dislike this presentation so much? Well, the perception of something can be shifted very heavily by its closing act, and this presentation's closing act was a Todd Howard jump scare showcasing a bunch of ports and remakes coming to Switch 2. And yeah, I think that's a large part of the reason why people came away not really liking this direct. I think another thing is just the conceptual problem with partner showcases, and that appeals to such a narrow audience of people. There's the obvious subset of Nintendo fans that pretty much exclusively play and get excited for Nintendo games, and so they're not going to be interested in much of this stuff. But even the audience who might be excited for this stuff, probably on multiple platforms, and likely already have these games on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Nintendo kinda got away with announcements like these back in the earlier Switch 1 era, because A, first party stuff was often getting announced alongside it, as partner showcases didn't exist until 2020, and B, The early Switch era was coming off of the disastrous Wii U era, in which third parties were rapidly jumping ship from releasing their games on Nintendo platforms. Less so the 3DS, but you get the idea. Add to that the fact that the Switch one was even kinda pushing on being underpowered at the time, and it was viewed as a miracle that these games were ending up on Switch in the first place. That luster has long worn off. With how well the Switch 1 sold and how hyped the Switch 2 was, it's more of an expectation and matter of when, not if, previously titled Miracle ports are gonna happen. We don't really have the "it's cool this gone to a Nintendo platform" mindset anymore. And so what that leaves us with is third-party ports, mixed with some exclusives that have to stand on their own as announcements, without first-party announcements to tide over the people who unironically think Nintendo has forgotten about Mario. Again, I don't think this presentation on its own was that bad, but when you consider a lot of the outside factors, such as the fact we don't know a ton about first-party stuff past Tomodachi Life, which is releasing in just a couple months, along with the fact that there's a smaller audience than Nintendo may realize for these kinds of presentations, and I completely understand why people did not care for this part of the showcase. But that's just me. What do you think? Do you agree with me, or do you think I'm crazy and off base? Thanks for watching, and I hope you have a great day.